All right. Welcome to Gen TV. This is Talk to Me, and I'm here with Mr. Paul Pomfrey, social political activist. Welcome, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
All right. Can you hear me perfectly?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, I'm glad you're back because the supportive viewers always ask about what happened to Paul. I say, you know what? You don't want Paul back here because Paul speak the truth to power. But listen, I'm just gonna play a quick clip, and you're gonna talk to me, my brother, because it looks like the more we get closer to the election date, the countdown for the midterms, we're almost 29 days before the midterms. I want to play a clip because right now it looks like some politician are under fire right now. I'm just gonna play the clip and then we can go and about talking about what this controversy.
Messaging, Alabama Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville hit the stage at former President Trump's rally in Nevada last night. And, well, let's just roll the tape.
They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Bullshit.
Okay, now, oh man. I don't know. It's something about certain politician though. Do they always have to be hard? Showing the tough political toughness, even though whatever they're gonna say will maybe hurts people. What do you make of that comment? They don't want all they want is reparation. They're not tough on crime. I mean, you heard the tape. I will play it again if needs be. But what you make of that situation, that comment?
Well, first thing, I think it shows a complete ignorance on his part. But unfortunately, too many people in this country has been fed a tremendous amount of misinformation and ignorance. And I'm going to give you some examples because I'm going to take it not just from a domestic point of view, but from an international point of view. We need to ask ourselves some questions here about the politicians that represent us on Capitol Hill and as well as in the White House. For example, the United States spent about $2.3 trillion in Afghanistan over a 20-year period. That's money that could have been used to lower the tuition rate for college students. That's money that could be used for affordable housing. That's money that could be used for a national health insurance. That's money that could have been used for so many different things that would have benefited the average person in this country. And here, this politician who went along with spending this money in Afghanistan have the audacity to start talking about reparations and other things along that line. Now, we've had 4 presidents lie to us about Afghanistan. You had George Bush. You had Obama, who actually spent more time in Afghanistan than George Bush did. And then you also had Donald Trump, as well as a few months Biden's administration in Afghanistan. And what was it that they promised us? They were going to establish democracy. Well, that didn't happen. They were going to establish a better life for young girls and women so they could go to school and they could work in jobs and have a better life. That didn't happen. They were going to train a sophisticated military in Afghanistan to make sure there would be no terrorists in control of the country. That didn't happen. They were going to develop the economy of Afghanistan. That didn't happen. And what a lot of people don't know is that in the 20 years the United States was in Afghanistan, Afghanistan was the largest producer of heroin in the world. They produced over 95% of the heroin that went to Europe and over 90% of the heroin that came to the United States. So we must ask those politicians, including that ignorant one who just spoke, that you played the tape on, why was our tax dollars being misused in Afghanistan at the same time that he's running around here talking about reparations and misrepresenting the reality of what's going on in this country? Because maybe it may have been less violence in our community had the needs of our community been addressed with that $2.3 trillion. And that's not even counting the amount of money the United States spent in Iraq. And everybody knows the justification for why they went into Iraq was unjustified, that it was misrepresenting the reality of what went on in Iraq when the United States went to invade in Iraq, and the U.S. is still there in Iraq. And yet this politician is not talking at all about these trillions of dollars. When you add the amount of money we spend in Iraq and the amount of money we spend in Afghanistan, just those two places alone.
And we continue to spend money because there is no ongoing war in Ukraine. So
that was my next point. You got me ahead. You got a little bit ahead of me.
Yeah.
Because then you look at what's going on right now. The United States quickly jumped and spent billions of dollars in Ukraine. For what? What is this about? Well, obviously, most of us can remember, or at least read in the books, if they are too young, that in 1962, the United States was ready to go to World War III. Why was that? Because Russia was going to be bringing nuclear weapons, or the Soviet Union was going to be bringing nuclear weapons to Cuba. And yet here you have the United States talking about bringing Ukraine into NATO. When they brought Poland into NATO, they brought nuclear weapons into Poland. Now they're talking about bringing Ukraine into NATO, which means what? They're going to put nuclear weapons in Ukraine too?
So before we get deep into this, I'm just kind of surprised to see politician playing this political game, calling the Democrats soft on crimes. They love crimes. They want to take everything from you, and they want to reparation.
The biggest thief and the biggest criminal are the acts of the U.S. government as they've carried out these unjust wars against people in Afghanistan.
So before we get this into the international politics, and I understand you're making a valid point, especially about how much money we spend on foreign countries, and why we have some needs here as well. My thing is it looks like the nervousness that I see when it comes to it looks like reparation is a dirty word here in this political discourse nowadays, and charging the Democrats being the people that favor reparation. I just want you to kind of back up a little bit and trying to unpack what the narrative behind this, because some people, and you can see even in the CNN, some of the CNN contributors here, they were talking about some racist undertone. Let's listen for a second.
Bullshit. They are not owed that.
But again, the question is,
hold on a second. I think I'm gonna roll this tape again and trying to see the whole perspective of the point I'm trying to make.
They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Bullshit.
Okay, so just based on that, before we even get into the international politics, based on that, it is trying to make the point, because we get into the midterm in the election, and then you have to show that the Republican is actually the right party, to attract voter to be voting for. But the argument, this is like the politics of everything goes.
Well, this
You
is
know,
my
you would
point.
use every words, even if you know you're gonna offend people, but you know, you're just gonna use it. What reparation have to do with this? You know, whatever you're talking about. We have some issues here that education.
Well,
There's a lot to be talking about education.
right.
You
Well,
know, we have a
here's my point about the reparations comment he made. Let's ask the question. United States started, say, in the 1700s. Great Britain and Europe existed long before then. The question has to be asked, how was it that the United States, starting in the 1700s, was able to surpass the economy of Great Britain, France, Germany, and so many other countries in Europe when they had existed years, many years, hundreds of years longer than the establishment of the US government? And the answer is very simple: slavery. The United States was able to build a very strong economy off of slavery. It also was able to build a very strong economy off of robbing. After all, you have to remember, this is Indigenous Peoples Day. It also built this economy off of stealing as much land as they could steal in this country from the people who are already living here. And yet you got politicians like this guy acting as if that has nothing to do with the wealth that this country has today. Really? Are you serious? So let's just subtract the wealth coming out of the ground that was stolen in this country by the Europeans who came over here. What would the economy of the United States be today? And so for him to step back and act as if the history of this country is irrelevant to the realities of what's going on here today in this country is just ludicrous. Obviously, it's clear that this man knows nothing or chooses to act as if he knows nothing about the history of this country and how this country got to be the way it is today and how this economy of this country got to be grown as big as it is today. And it came from mass murder, slavery, and pillaging of people's land across from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. So if this country ever paid back what it stole, paid back the amount of people it killed unjustly, paid back the money that they were able to generate from forcing people into free labor, clearly the cards would be totally changed and look differently than it does today. So he just says, basically, from what he's saying is, let us forget about the crimes that were committed by this country against Native people in this country. Let's forget about the crimes that are made against people of African descent in this country. Let's forget about the crimes even made against women, even white women in this country. Let's forget about all that. Because after all, this country owes nothing for the crimes it's committed. And this is where we are today, having politicians misrepresent the truth and then get people all pumped up to, follow along with this distortion.
So on top of this destruction, do you think there's also distraction? Because it looks like a real issues. We're not talking about real issues. Talking about crime. There's no party in America that favor crime. Nobody can tell you that I just love crime or I'm soft on crime. And when he says the crime issue is a Democrat issue, I think he probably didn't read or know what Bill Clinton have done when it comes to crime and how tough Democrats have been on crime and how much some of the policies have affected the minority people. So
well, I will say this when you start talking about crime, and again, you have to look at our U.S. Congress. Our Congress consistently carries out extreme crimes, as I said earlier. I mean, how many thousands of people lost their lives? because of decisions made by the president of this country, as well as the Congress of this country, and going out and going to other people's countries and plundering them. Let's look at what this country has done in Haiti against the people of Haiti. It happens over and over again. And most people don't even realize that if Haiti is as poor as the media try to make it look like, why does the United States have its fourth largest embassy in the world in Haiti? And don't take my word for it, Google it. Google the United States Embassy in Haiti and see that, in fact, it states the fact that it's the fourth largest U.S. embassy in the world. So why is it there if Haiti is so poor? The fact is that the United States has plundered the wealth of people of African descent from Africa all the way over to this hemisphere. And yet they turn around and they try to make it look like, oh, this is no problem, we shouldn't be concerned about that. What we should be concerned about is whatever we stole, we should keep. And try to bring fear in people's hearts and making it look like the victims are the people that should be seen as the enemies versus, in fact, the perpetrators, which is the U.S. Congress and the U.S. presidency, have perpetrated.
But historically, Paul, historically, the reparation, African American, and I assume that the conversation around
be where it is today if it wasn't from slavery.
Right. So my thing is, what I was trying to say is that the African American would not be the first group that America actually pay reparation, and you will agree with me that Japanese community have received reparation in the past. So why is the reparation word is so dirty today when we have evidence of wrongdoing in a system that pretend to be capitalistic? I think if you do some work, you have to get them paid. That's how the system works. If you don't get paid,
it was clear that the United States insisted on reparations be paid to the Jewish community for the crimes made against the Jewish community. I mean, the United States picks and chooses, especially as politicians, picks and choose what is right and what is wrong. And it in direct contradiction to their decisions for certain. That this idea of him trying to make the issue reparations for people of African descent in this country, anyone who knows anything about the history of this country realizes that this country gained a tremendous amount of its wealth from what is stole in labor costs in this country from African Americans. That's a reality.
Is it this information? Do you think, honestly? Usually when we talk about the reparation, it looks like the information is not even documented. The way that the nervousness, the anxiety behind the reparation. Why do you think there is so much controversy around reparation when it comes to African descent?
I think that really is because of who this guy really represents. He didn't represent the people he was talking to. He represents the large corporations who benefited, the banks, and the large corporations who benefited from the crimes that happened against people of African descent, from the crimes that happened against the people of Native Americans, of the indigenous people here in the United States, from the crime that has happened against women even being discriminated in this country. I mean, the reality is he's not representing the people he's talking to. He's representing the corporations who have been the actual people who have received the benefit of these crimes. And that's who he's speaking on behalf of. And so obviously he's trying to throw the blame on the victims versus the people who have committed the crimes.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, I need to ask you some questions about the current war in Ukraine and how you see this whole situation develop.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, we're back here with Paul Pomfrey, social political activist here at home and internationally. My friend, listen, I know you are your specialty is you're part of the group called the Friend of Congo. Today we won't have time to go into all of this case by case, but tell me a little bit about this war in Ukraine. When you see the way we start, first the international community said told they did warn Russia not to go to Ukraine and do whatever they did, but still Putin has his own mind based on the evidence that that the West, NATO, and its Western allies, they've done enough for him to feel that he was threatened. So he have to do what he have to do for his own survival. That was not the point of view for many people. Now, it looks like there is a little shift in the conversation nowadays. We're talking about a possibility of a nuclear war. Do you think this war in long term will eventually put us in a situation where this power have to just confront each other, physically?
Well, I think it's very important that we look at the situation in Ukraine for what it really is. First, the media chose not to talk about the fact that the role the United States played in the military coup, putting the present government in Ukraine into power about 14 months, maybe 16 months ago. And so that government got there not because of an election. It got there because of a military coup in which the United States, I'm sure, played a major role, as well as other nations in Western Europe played in that coup. But secondly, they didn't also talk about the fact, the media chooses not to talk about the fact, that when the Berlin Wall came down and the Warsaw Pact was dissolved, that NATO continued to expand eastward towards the Russian border. In fact, when NATO went into Poland, what did they do? They moved nuclear weapons into Poland. When NATO went into Romania, what did they do? They used nuclear weapons they put into Romania. And so it appeared that more and more NATO was creeping closer and closer to the Russian border and bringing countries into NATO, and after bringing them into NATO, moving nuclear weapons closer and closer to Russia. The question we need to ask ourselves is this. If Russia signed a military agreement tomorrow with Canada or Mexico or even Brazil, where they said, okay, we will bring nuclear weapons and put them into your countries, and they agreed to that, what would the United States do? Do you really think the United States should just sit back and say, oh, well, we don't agree with you, but whatever. These countries are independent. They have the right to do whatever they want? No, because we didn't do that with Cuba. When the Soviet Union was bringing nuclear weapons to Cuba, Kennedy made it very clear. The United States considered that a complete threat to the security of the United States. And if the Soviet Union chose to go forward with that, that would mean an act of war. And when he said an act of war, he meant a nuclear war. That the United States would be willing to go to a nuclear war with the Soviet Union if those weapons were brought anywhere near the U.S. border. So why all of a sudden now, people seem to have forgotten that part of our history and not understand that Russia will probably feel the same way, with the United States moving nuclear weapons closer and closer to their border. Why wouldn't Russia sit back and say, hey, we're ready to do whatever is necessary to prevent the threat to the security of the sovereignty of their nation? You have a military coup, and then that new government comes in and starts a war against people who speak Russian in the southern part of the country and the eastern part of the country. I mean, it's clear indications that they're going after even their own citizens that speak Russian and attacking them. And they've done that for over 8 months. So why are we now listening to the media and accepting the media's version of who's at fault and what's going on with this war?
You
United,
know,
United
there
States was
was
very clear and stopped the war and said, okay, I'll tell you what, we're not going to bring Ukraine into NATO or the European Union. So now you have no reason to be feeling threatened. So you don't need to go across the border into Ukraine. But that's not what the United States did. In fact, let's look at the preparation the United States did for that war. The United States was involved in Afghanistan for 20 years, both Democrat and Republican presidents. Why was President Biden so much anxious to get out of the war in Afghanistan unless he was preparing for a war in Ukraine? I mean, what was so much different between what was happening in Afghanistan during the Bush administration and the Obama administration and the Trump administration that President Biden, and everybody knows who looked at what happened in Afghanistan as the United States left Afghanistan, it was a rush job. Why was President Biden in such a rush to get out of Afghanistan? Maybe because he understood what he was getting ready to do in threatening Russia with Ukraine by trying to talk about Ukraine becoming a part of NATO. And the following thing that usually happens is if Ukraine becomes a part of NATO, the United States will probably move nuclear weapons right onto the border of Russia. Would the United States not invade Canada if Canada allowed Russia to have a military agreement where Russia could bring nuclear weapons into Canada? Do you think, does anybody in this country believe the United States wouldn't be ready to go to war against Canada if they made that decision? Or Mexico, if they made that decision? Or even Cuba, if they made that decision? Or any other country in this hemisphere, in the Americas? Do we really believe that the United States would not be ready to go to war? And even to the level of possible nuclear war if Russia brought in nuclear weapons or had an agreement to bring in nuclear weapons into any of these countries in the Americas. So
absolutely.
why
So
am I surprised that Russia would act that way and act like this is totally irrational thinking that Russia's doing? But the question really comes is this: why is the United States spending so much of our tax dollars, okay, on Ukraine, when in fact it made a number of promises? I mean, President Biden made a number of promises to the people of this country, and then turned around and backed away from those promises, claiming that he didn't have money to do the things that he had promised in his campaign. But yet he can find all kinds of billions of dollars to send over to Ukraine today. It's hypocrisy. And we need to be calling out our politicians on we should spend money where it's really needed and addressing the needs of the people of this country and addressing the needs of this world even.
But one thing though, that both parties want, they will talk about, they will be fighting over reparation, fighting about police. I mean, crime here at home. But one thing that they always agree on is when it comes to the military budgets, increasing the military budgets, or giving money to some of our allies overseas. That is something both parties usually agree on. But when it comes to the domestic issues where we need both parties to solve, it usually you see the political ping pong, issues like reparation. When we have real problem with education right now, we our kids. I'm an educator. I can tell you, and our schools performance is keep plumbing, down the toilet when you compare them to Asian country, for example.
The United States should be investing in the educational system in this country. It shouldn't have to cost somebody, 5, 10, 15, 20 years of paying off a college debt just to go to college. And there was no guarantee you're going to get a job. At the same time, so why is it that Europe can have education at a much lower cost than that of the United States, when the United States is supposed to be the most developed country in the world.
Right.
It's because the United States is using way more of our tax dollars in pushing war around the world than any other country in the world. We look at the U.S. military budget. Congress just got through passing a military budget for next year of over $840 billion. That's over 2/3 of $1 trillion. That's over 3/4 of $1 trillion. Did anybody ever Google how much Russia is spending on its military?
Much less.
It's about $63 billion. 63 versus 840 billion.
But how you explain that Russia have they have more nukes than any country? They have more nuclear power, capability.
The issue is not quantity; it's quality. United States has much more sophisticated nuclear arsenal than that of Russia. Russia also is a much larger country than that of the United States. You could put the United States inside of Russia at least 3 times. So if Russia's going to defend its borders, surely it's got much more of an area to defend than the United States does. So yes, they may have more nuclear, but the question is, does anyone ask what is the quality of their nuclear weaponry compared to that of the United States? Has anyone asked what the delivery system of their nuclear weapons quality is compared to that of the United States? When we look at numbers, you have to look at quality versus quantity.
But do you think we are getting even closer to that conversation about, because it looks like, because when I listened to President Zelensky on BBC, it was kind of in some terms calling for the international community to stop, Russia before Russia started to think about, using nuclear power. And he said, I don't know, but the bottom line is, it looks like he was asking the West to do something to stop stop Putin.
Again, you have to ask your question: is how qualified is a comedian in being a head of state?
Well, he was elected. That's what matters.
He wasn't elected. That's the point. He came there by way of coup d'etat. He didn't come there by election. He came there by way of coup d'etat. And that's a military force into a position, similar to when Pinochet came to power inside of Chile. That's the point. The point is that you have United States activity inside of Ukraine and have been actively involved inside of Ukraine. For example, United States claims it's against biological warfare. But why do we still have Fort Detrick's? When in fact we had the scare of anthrax in the Washington D.C. area, if you remember a few years back.
Yeah.
And people started making the claim that maybe it was Saddam Hussein that was bringing anthrax into Washington D.C. and threatening the politicians in Washington D.C. The only problem with that was the U.S. government had to come out and admit it was not Saddam Hussein.
Right.
Now, the question is, how did they know it wasn't Saddam Hussein? Because the United States had given Saddam Hussein anthrax, and the DNA didn't match to the anthrax that we gave Saddam Hussein. So one has to ask the question, why was the United States sending biological weapons to Saddam Hussein, a person that the U.S. presidents defined as a madman? Why would we be sending that to this man and giving him an arsenal of biological warfare? Obviously, it was because they wanted them to use those weapons against the people of Iran.
But if that argument is correct, though, my thing is, we went to Iraq after the presentation of former Secretary of State Colin Powell gave, right? He said that they have some biological weapons, okay, but we went into Iraq. I never see or all of this weapon, what is weapon of mass destruction, or biological weapons that they were claiming he has.
But
And if you say that America give it to them, why we couldn't recover what we were looking for?
Well, the question has to be asked is, what was the rush? Why, in fact, did the United States really wanted to go against Iraq? And let's look at what happened in Iraq in the first place. How did Saddam Hussein become the head of state in Iraq? By means of a coup d'etat orchestrated by an organization called the CIA. Now, why did they want Saddam Hussein to become the head of the government in Iraq? Because the United States had been embarrassed about the fact that the Shah of Iran was overthrown. And the United States did not want to directly go to war against the government of Iran. So what did they do? They used their proxy. And what was their proxy? Saddam Hussein. They brought him to power specifically for him to go to war against Iran. And he did. And the United States supplied him with weapons, including biological weapons. The United States not only did that, but they also organized the Arab states, such as Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, to give him money to buy weapons to fight against Iran. But then what happened? Saddam Hussein actually found out that he had a huge deposit of oil 10 miles away from the Kuwaiti border. And there was no way that he would be able to extract that oil from the Kuwait, 10 miles close to the Kuwaiti border, because it was too close to Iran, while he was still fighting against Iran. So Saddam Hussein made a decision. Okay, making this money off this oil is more important than me following what the United States wants me to do and fight against Iran. So he got a peace agreement between Iraq and Iran. And the United States got very upset with him for doing that. But not only that, Saddam Hussein went a step further. Saddam Hussein said, if you want to buy my oil, you have to buy it with euro dollars. And you do not, I will not sell you our oil with US dollars anymore. And that was a direct threat to the US economy, because the US economy has nothing to back up its dollars except for oil being sold around the world. And so with that was when the first war came about in Iraq. It was over the fact that Saddam Hussein refused to accept any more US dollars for oil. Secondly, and of course, Europe wanted that because they had euro dollars. So that made it easier for them. They didn't have to go and exchange their money for US money to buy oil from Saddam Hussein. And that's when George Herbert Walker Bush, decided to go to war inside of Iraq. So we need to be clear on what happened and why it's happening. Because, in fact, what the United States has done in these countries is criminal. It's absolutely criminal. And then after that war, the United States put all kinds of restrictions on Saddam Hussein, including his ability to buy medicine, in which they estimated thousands of children died because they weren't able to get decent medicine, even though they had the oil to pay for it. And then you come up with the second war inside of Iraq. And what was that all about? And again, the United States was trying to put the squeeze on Saddam Hussein. And Saddam Hussein, in response to that squeeze, said, no, I'm not going to accept the squeeze anymore. I'm going to tell Kuwait the money I borrowed to carry this war out against Iran, I will pay them, but I'm not going to pay them in 1 year. And that's when Kuwait got into a battle with Saddam Hussein. But then it gave another pretext for the United States to get involved again with another war inside of Iraq. But let's be clear on this. Why should U.S. soldiers put their lives on the line on these type of games that are being played and forcing young people to go to war when there's not a need to go to war in this country. So often, we're having people lose their lives, lose their mind, lose their limbs on wars that are uncalled for. So, yes, we need to hold the Congress accountable for them wasting so much of our tax dollars on unnecessary wars, and also refusing to address the real needs of the people of this country, including making the people who generate the largest amount of money in this country to pay their fair share in taxes. How can a company as big as Amazon, as rich as Amazon, last year not pay taxes? These are what questions we really should be asking.
But when that question, remember during the election when Trump was running, he said is the reason why he didn't pay tax because he was smart. So we just have to have that. All the little people like ourselves need to be a little bit smarter in dodging to pay taxes. It's the opposite. Those who make a fortune usually take advantage of the loopholes in the tax.
But they can't take
policies.
advantage of it if the advantage wasn't put into the law in the beginning.
Absolutely.
So the laws, these Congress people are diverting the attention away from their responsibilities. He's wanting to blame people of African descent in this country for why things are going wrong, when in fact, the real blame should be right there where he goes to work every day, on Capitol Hill and in the White House. That's where these problems are being created and not being addressed.
So the fear. Let me bring you back into, and thank you for the historical perspective that you gave. It help us to really understand what's going on in nowadays. So the anxiety, because I'm been trying to dig a little bit deeper to understand why is that for somebody who rational, somebody normal who knows that there was some wrongdoing made on a set of population, a part of our citizens for so long, 400 years for some numbers, and whenever that conversation come about, people get upset, mad, and I'm personally, being in a capitalistic society, you would believe this society is made on I've worked for you, you pay me, and if you don't, then I can even take you to court. So why is that people the lawmakers, people you will expect to understand that logic? Why is that conversation is to the point where you can see the anger? I mean, what's the fear about?
Bottom line again is he sees that his job is to protect the rights of the rich to continue to rob our society, and not just our society, but to rob many parts of the rest of the world. And I must make another factor about the Ukrainian war. The fact is that Europe does not have a lot of natural gas. And because they do not have a lot of natural gas, they're dependent upon getting foreign natural gas. And the cheapest source of foreign natural gas comes from Russia. Now, when the United States and President Biden made a statement in February that was quite clear when questioned by a German reporter about those pipelines coming from Russia to Germany. And President Biden came straight out and said, those pipelines will never operate if Russia comes into Ukraine. And she asked him to explain, what did he mean when he said emphatically that they would never function? And he just said, they would never function. He repeated himself, they would never function. So what was he trying to tell us? That in fact, the United States had already made plans of how to destroy those pipelines so that Germany would not have the gas they need to heat their homes this winter. They would not have the gas necessary to produce the electric power they need to run their industries and to keep their lights on. or that they would be forced to have to pay 2 times, 3 times that of value on gas to buy it from the United States. Now, of course, that's going to benefit the gas industry here in the United States, but it's certainly going to cripple the European industrial position in the world.
But isn't it? But I think part of the economics also strategy that you also have to understand that is that if some of the Western Europe or European Western in Europe, if they do not buy gas or oil from Russia, America now is the major supplier, and some of them was.
That's my point. U.S. gas companies will benefit tremendously. Why? Because it certainly is going to be 3 times, 4 times more expensive to pressurize the gas and make it into liquid, put it on a ship and bring it across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, how much of that gas can you put on a ship to bring over the Atlantic Ocean at a time? And so, yes, the gain will go to the U.S. gas companies. No question about that. But the huge loss will go to the industries in Europe that need that gas to operate. The huge loss will go to the people in Europe that would need that gas to keep their schools warm, their hospital warm, and their homes warm. And so, yes, it'll be a major windfall economically for the United States and its gas companies. But it'll be a major economic loss to Western Europe. And the question we need to ask ourselves is this: how many more blows will the Western Europe be willing to accept that the United States is throwing their way before they say enough? We're not going to play this game anymore.
Well, listen, I'm going to close with this quote from President de Gaulle of France.
In reference to what's going on with this natural gas situation with Russia. And then the United States had the audacity to try to make it look like Russia destroyed their own pipeline. For what purpose?
Well,
they're the ones benefiting for those pipelines. So why would they want to destroy it?
But the same argument can be used by the United States. The United States have no reason to destroy
after opening his mouth one more time when he shouldn't have.
Well, each leader, each country, each leader
on destroying those pipelines.
Wait a minute.
Now it's trying to turn around and make it look like, oh, well, Russia.
I'm trying to make a point here, Mr. Paul. I say, each leader, each country, Mr. Paul, I'm trying to make a point. Listen. What I was trying to say is that.
Can't hear you.
My thing is, each leader, is just like, when you are, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Your mic is off.
Really? How come?
Can
you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? I can hear you pretty good, but you cannot hear me. Wow.
I cannot hear you. You're on mute.
Yeah, that's kind of I do not understand what's going on. Yes, for some reason I don't know. My microphone. For some reason I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I think for some reason, So what I was trying to say is that President de Gaulle, in one of his famous de Gaulle of France, one of his famous quotes, he says, when it comes to an international relationship, there is no friendship between countries. There's only interest. So just like you always say, when it comes to talking about African countries, each leaders have the responsibility to make sure that he take care of his own people. You cannot depend on the United States to fight for your interest. So if European countries do not understand what's going on, you cannot blame the United States. Our system is well defined, and they tell exactly through the capitalism. It's clear what they're gonna be doing, and their policy is gonna be to the benefits of the United States and maybe its allies. But you got to understand that in this relationship with other countries, our interests come first. So if you, as a leader of your own country, you don't think to do the same thing, there's no way you can blame the United States. It's your responsibility to do so.
Quite on the contrary, when you talk about being in an alliance, that's an agreement that you're saying you're looking out for each other.
Right.
And when you choose not to look out for each other, then you've broken your agreement of the alliance. And NATO is an alliance. And so when one party in NATO actually makes it extremely difficult economically, socially, politically, for another member of NATO to function, then in fact, to me, that would be a violation of an alliance. Especially if the one that's losing, while the other party is gaining from their loss.
But honestly,
so the question is, why would Europe want to even be a part of the United States NATO alliance if the United States is going to take pot shots at their economy, causing their economy to be destroyed? Let's face it.
So I think so far,
if Germany could not sell cars to the United States or any of the other manufacturing goods to the United States, what would be the economy of Germany tomorrow? And it's not just Germany. Great Britain's in the same boat. France is in the same boat. Italy would be in the same boat. Belgium will be in the same boat. Switzerland will be in the same boat. So they're not going to go through a very cold winter.
But I believe Germany and Switzerland, Germany particularly, they didn't completely cut ties with buying or energy from Russia. It was not. They didn't. It is countries like France that completely get into this nonsense. But I think Germany was smart enough to say, listen, now we understand the situation, but for our own survival, they have to buy some energy from Russia.
Well, again, my point was their decision not to buy gas from Russia didn't come from them. It came from whoever blew up the pipeline.
But before that, the pipeline the destruction was let on. The decision of
that was in the middle of the, yes,
that was not
true. But that was in the middle of the summer. That was in warm weather. They're getting ready to go into winter right now. Okay. And you're gonna
and again, there's no evidence that the United States destroyed the pipeline. There's no evidence of that. Because
my point is, who would benefit from it? Who would benefit from the destruction of the pipeline? Germany would not benefit.
That is a great question, but we have to always this is the United States. We have to have the evidence to the contrary.
Again,
you cannot just assume.
The evidence that Biden emphatically made a statement, and I will send you the statement he made, and you can look at the tape for yourself. He made it very clear that no way, if Russia came into Ukraine, that pipeline will allow that there will be where that pipeline will bring gas into Europe, into Western Europe. He made that very clear. And the German reporter questioned him a second time after he made the statement the first time. And he came right back and said the same thing. So maybe he can read the future. I don't know. But I can say one thing for sure. Biden made a very clear statement that pipeline will not allow, that pipeline will not exist to bring gas into Europe if, in fact, Russia came into Ukraine.
Okay.
So one can only assume that either he's very clairvoyant and he can see the future, or maybe the United States, as they have had so many times in the past, did sabotage.
Well, listen, my friend, it's a great conversation, and I will bring you back into this because the American people they have to listen to a alternative view, and you guys watching there right now, please support Gen TV so we can bring you perspective like the one you listen to right now. This is an independent thinker. Mr. Paul is on. He has a mind of his own, and he will give you the perspective that is supposed to be right. So please, if you want to listen, we don't have the monopoly of the truth, but we will give you an alternative, point of view to help you, dive even deeper by yourself. So,
Well,
my friend.
for the opportunity to share my thoughts.
Absolutely, my friend. This is America. It's a democracy. Everybody has is entitled to his own opinion. All right, my friend. Listen, we are gonna leave right there. Thank you again for your perspective. It's always a blessing to have you on. I look forward to speak with you another time. Take care of yourself.
Good night.
All right. So that concludes our show for tonight. If you like the show, or if you dislike whatever we're saying, please make sure that you send us some question, or just request if you want to say something different from what Paul said tonight. And Paul, as I know him, he never shy away from a debate or conversation. Please let us know. We bring you back here, and you can confront your ideas with his. All right. So as for me, my name is Malik Lenzanzo. That was Talk to Me. And let me talk to you probably tomorrow. Take care.